Hello. Some of you may have, if you saw this talk last year, it's the same talk, so you don't have to stay. They were kind enough to let me do it again because it went pretty well last year and it's got good information. But if you did see it last year, it is the same general idea. There's a couple new innovations that I brought with me that I'll be able to share. And this is not a .NET talk or a Microsoft talk. This is a talk about my open source artificial pancreas. People sometimes laugh when I say that, but it is a real thing. I've been using an open source artificial pancreas for over 2 years, almost 3. It's a very new thing, and I do not take credit for any of this other than being a member of the community. And there's no one person that can take credit for this. It's libraries and innovations and moments of technology that have all been brought together by a number of community leaders. And there's now, in fact, choice in artificial pancreases. There's 3 or 4 different pancreases you can choose from depending on your needs, which is pretty interesting. I have been diabetic, type 1 diabetic, for 25 years. Any type 1 diabetics in the room? Our guy right here. Anybody else? Just you? That's unusual for a group this large. Are you in a pump or pens? Pens. Okay, I'm going to use you later as an example. Listen to my podcast. It's very good. I worked very hard on it, and it's been around for a very long time. I had this fellow on. He's a doctor doing research into bionic, he called them bionic pancreases. I talked to him in 2014. Smart fella, but nobody's selling these yet. It's been 5 years. And that's kind of an interesting thing that I talked to this gentleman in 2014. It's 2019, and here we are, and where's my jetpack? Isn't that always the way? I've been diabetic for 1/4 of a century, and they have been telling me every year that in 5 years they would cure it. So we got tired of waiting. So we figured we'd do it ourselves. Usually when you do a talk like this about health, you usually put a picture of yourself doing something fit. This is not me. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what his deal is or what he's trying to accomplish. I don't know who's taking the picture or who thought that was a good idea. Most of my exercise injuries are mostly Netflix related. Again, that's me. I've written about diabetes for many years on my blog, techniques, ways to hack your body. Let me give you some basics of type 1 diabetes. If there's any type 1s, so you gentlemen over here, or any type 2s that disagree, it's an open forum. We should talk about it. If I mischaracterize some aspect of diabetes that you feel that I got wrong, definitely speak up, because we want to make sure we get it right. But type 1s are not type 2s. And this is an unfortunate thing, because type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes sound like the same thing. Like just different flavors of the same thing. They're just 2 different kind of sugar metabolism related diseases. They're so different, they really should be called something else. Type 1 diabetes means that my pancreas makes no insulin. I produce 0 insulin. If you give me a bunch of sugar, I can't process it, I can't do anything with it, and I'll eventually die. So I have to put insulin in me. I have to replace what I cannot make myself. Type 2 diabetes is a much more complicated thing that you often see in elderly folks or people who are of a certain size or have got a genetic makeup that is causing them to use the insulin that they do make ineffectively. So they make insulin, they just don't either make enough or they don't use it very effectively, and often they are prescribed pills or work out, eat less carbs type of a thing. Oftentimes I'll post something about type 1 diabetes, which is not something I can cure, and very well-meaning people from cultures all over the world will suggest Ayurvedic this, or health yoga that, or stress this, or these are all useful techniques. They will improve my diabetes, but they can't cure it. So, like particularly with our friends in India, there's a lot of herbs and things that you can use to improve diabetes. Largely, those are targeted towards type 2 diabetes. They will allow you to use your insulin more effectively. They will allow you to reduce stress, reduce inflammation. All of these things are positive things. But I need you to understand, if you are going to email me afterwards about how I should use some herbs and spices, that I literally make no insulin. So I would need to use a combination of stress techniques and things like that, and tea and whatnot, and also some insulin. I have found personally that when I use more Eastern medicines, I can lower the amount of insulin I use, which means I'm being more effective. It's like I got a headache, I can take 5 ibuprofen, or I can do some breathing exercises and take 1. So it's that kind of a thing. So the analogy that we like to use when we explain diabetes is this airplane analogy. Now this is an oversimplified thing. So if anyone here is doing research in the space or is a PhD, I gave a talk at the Open University earlier this week, and it turns out half the room had PhDs. And they felt that I had oversimplified things. But for a lay person audience, yes, I'm going to oversimplify things. Okay. Food raises blood sugar. Anything that you eat goes into your body and it turns into sugar. If you eat sugar, it turns into sugar. If you eat meat, it turns into sugar. Everything turns into glucose. And glucose sits in your bloodstream, and it needs to then be delivered. So you eat some stuff, it turns into sugar, it's in your bloodstream, and it's ready to be delivered to the cells. Insulin opens the doors of the hallways and allows the sugar to exit the blood vessels and enter the cells. It unlocks the door in the cell and says, okay, I can be delivered. High blood sugar means that I'm basically marinating in my own sugar. This is a real thing. If you've ever had any grandparents or has any relatives that have diabetes, you can smell it on them. It's in their breath. It's in their eyes. They are steeped in sugar. When they pee, it stinks because they're just the body just needs to get the sugar out through their breath, through their tongue, through their sweat. You are literally marinating in your own sugar until you die. That's called high blood sugar because the sugar is just sitting in the blood undelivered. Injected insulin lowers blood sugar. It doesn't really. It delivers blood sugar, thereby using it, and therefore the average amount of sugar in your blood is lowered. It delivers it to the cells. If you take too much insulin, you will remove all of the fuel from the fuel lines, and then your car will sputter. You won't have enough fuel to run your brain, and you'll pass out. I have an insulin pump plugged into me. It's plugged in here, 24 hours a day. I sleep with it. I put it behind the pillow. I remember when I'm sleeping not to rotate twice in any one direction, lest I die. And then I have an implant that is a battery that does Bluetooth that looks at my blood sugar. These are from 2 different companies, and we'll talk about the details of those things. All of these things work to get insulin into me to keep me alive. What is the goal? My goal is to not die of this. Success for a diabetic is dying of anything else. Ideally, I would get hit by an ice cream truck. I think that would be a very sweet irony. Unfortunately, diabetics die of diabetes. Number 1 cause of blindness, number 1 cause of kidney failure, number 1 cause of amputation. That's a weird thing. Blood sugar, why are we losing feet? Why is grandma and people losing their toes? They literally chop the toes, then the feet, then the legs, and they move their way up. You go blind, and then you die. Again, an oversimplification. Do you have here these little honey bears? They're like a squeezy bear you put in your tea to get the honey. You know, it's like a plastic bear, and there's honey in it, and you squeeze it and you put in your tea. You know the top of that, where the honey gets around the edges, it gets all gross and crystallized, and you have to kind of clean it off? Any kind of a sugar, jams, jellies, they get that crystallized, gross, sugary stuff that kind of grows. Imagine that in your veins. Where are the little veins? Toes, eyes, fingertips. If it gets clogged, filled, coated in sugar, then things won't be able to, energy will not be able to get to them, so then they die. They die a little bit at a time. Your nerves die so that you can't feel your toes. You don't know it, your toe's numb. Then you stub your toe, you get an infection, you don't know you have an infection, your toe dies, your foot turns black, and then they chop it off. And then it goes like that. That's why diabetics go blind and why they lose their extremities. So it kind of sucks. Highs will kill you slow. Much like flying an airplane, if you continue to raise your altitude, you'll eventually go into the stratosphere and die slowly. Lows, much with flying, will kill you quick. If you hit 0 altitude, depending on your slope, you will die. If I remove too much insulin, then I will have a seizure or a coma. And if with a high, though, it'll kill you over a year. That really sucks. And some of us have seen our relatives either die or suffer with diabetes. My situation is such that I look at this CGM, continuous glucose meter. It's sitting in my arm, and it gives me a trend line. It gives me a sense of what my blood sugar is, but it's not 100% accurate because it's not really testing blood. It's testing interstitial fluid. We're just big meat bags, right? We're just big old bags of meat with juice in them, and about 70% of us is water. So it's looking at the fluid in the interstitial area between the skin and the fat and the muscles, and it's looking at that, and it's doing an electrical signal and looking at the resistance across that space and determining, I think your blood sugar is about this. But I can't be sure, so I have to prick my fingers and look at real blood, whole blood as opposed to fluid, and determine what my blood sugar is. Then I have to count carbs, do math. Diabetics are really good at math. And we calculate how much insulin to take. Then I listen to my body, and I wonder if this number lied to me, or this number lied to me, or maybe I'm feeling sick, or maybe it's humid, or maybe I'm stressed or traveling, or the time zones are wrong, or maybe they gave me a regular Coke and not a Coke Zero. And then I loop again. The loop is closed by me. Inputs, and I make the decision. And my blood sugar looks like that. It's totally chaos. For you, all y'all, except this gentleman who's now my new friend, we're going to call you the normals. You're the normally sugared. You wake up in the morning, do whatever the hell you want, and wake up with great blood sugar, and then you eat whatever, and then you go to sleep, and you have great blood sugar, and your blood sugar looks like that. And we're not bitter at all. I have friends who've known me for 25 years, and they'll go, hey, would you like a cookie? Oh, I'm sorry, I said cookie. And then they'll just eat the cookie in front of you, Thank you for that painful reminder. Of like, Rob Connery comes up earlier. He's got like a big old piece of cake with frosting. And I was like, oh, did you bring me cake and frosting? And he's like, no. And he proceeds to eat it right there. So you get a diagnosis. How long have you been diabetic, sir?
10 years now.
OK, 10 years. Tell me if this is true. Every diabetic engineer, always. You get diagnosed, and you go, this sucks. You freak out, and you're like, all right, I'm going to write some code to fix it. I did it in Excel. I went and tried to, I can fix this. I just need a really good spreadsheet. And I checked my blood sugar, and I made a whole system, and I wrote code to solve the problem. Every diabetic engineer thinks that they can solve this. So I did this 20+ years ago. I wrote GlucoPilot for the Palm Pilot. And I hooked up blood sugar meters and serial ports, and I downloaded data into this thing, and then I upgraded it to color. Retina display, 160 by 160. It's pretty fantastic stuff. And I was uploading it with FTP and comma-separated values to my doctor 20 years ago. But there wasn't really a social web at this time. I could go on CompuServe, but who am I going to talk to about this stuff? It was a very lonely time to have any disease. Now, I'm just talking about diabetes, but everybody who's got something, you got to find your tribe so that you can realize that life sucks for everybody, right? Otherwise, it's just very lonely, especially for diabetic kids. So I would hook it up to a modem, and I would send it at 9,600 BPS up into the cloud, and I would manage it. I was very proud of this. I wrote all of this in C, in MetroWorks. Yeah, it was good times. How did I get the data from the blood sugar meter, though? That was very frustrating, because every company had a different standard. They had a different adapter, and they sometimes encrypted the data on the serial port. It's my blood sugar. Why are you making me use your app to get my blood sugar? That was obnoxious. You have to buy their port. You have to buy their software, because you could apparently hurt yourself with your own data. We are still now struggling to get a hold of our own data. So I said, I'm going to start writing meter downloaders. Remember coding for fun? This is 2007, 12 years ago. I wrote a WinForms app to download data from a freestyle glucose meter. And we would listen in on the serial port and try to figure out what was going on so we could break into these things. Imagine breaking into a device that holds your data. Right, I mean? It's just ridiculous. It's like breaking into the hotel safe. Not that I did that earlier, but I'm just throwing that out there. All the while I'm doing this without the social web, without social media, without blogs, I'm realizing that other people are doing this too. These are PhDs at a university, and they're figuring out how to put a blood sugar meter into a Palm Pilot. That'd be awesome. You talk about all the cool features you want with the notch and whatnot on an iPhone. I just want a blood sugar meter at the bottom. That would be the ultimate iPhone for me. People would build these ridiculous Rube Goldbergian solutions. You know who Rube Goldberg is? That's the thing where you put the marble and the marble slides and then it knocks the bowling ball and then it hits the iron and then the thing. They would build these solutions that were like, all right, well, here's my solution on Reddit. Yeah, I send a text to IFTTT with a number, and then it goes into a Google Drive spreadsheet, and then that kicks off a script, and they build these systems. And that's OK, because that's every diabetic engineer always. It's just that they're not really robust, they're not really reliable, and they're very personalized. It's a custom workflow. Now, how are we going to get this into our bodies? For a long time, we boiled needles, big, fat, multi-gauge, high-gauge needles. You'd boil them. You'd have 1 or 2 needles. They looked like the heroin needles you'd see in the 1920s in a leather kit. That's how they got insulin. And they would take pigs, and they would grind up their pancreases, and they would try to get the insulin out of the pig. And they would have beef and cow insulin. And in the 80s, they made human insulin. And they've been trying to speed up insulin. Insulin usually gets excreted into your system from the peritoneum, and it's already in your body when it gets made. But we have to get it into the body. So you have to puncture the skin and shove it into the fat. But fat is not really good at absorbing insulin. If you eat a cookie, your blood sugar will go up and immediately down because your body made insulin right away. With me, I need to wait 15 to 45 minutes before the fat absorbs the insulin that I'm shoving in. So sometimes I have to take insulin ahead of time in anticipation of a future cookie. Like, I'm going to eat a cookie, and everyone's eating their cookie. Like, I'm going to eat a cookie too. Take some insulin, and I sit there and I wait a half an hour, and then I eat the cookie. Because I need the curve of the sugar from the cookie to match the curve of the insulin that's waiting for it. So needles suck. So someone said, let's just make a pump. Now, to the gentleman over here, he uses pens. Pens are really cool. They are basically, in the old days, I used to have a needle, a syringe, and a thing, and I'd mix the insulin. It would be a whole deal. Now they have like pens that look like little pocket flashlights. And they have the needle, the insulin, and you turn a knob, and you go, and then you put it back in your pocket. It's a very, very clean system. But the resolution is not very high, and I'll talk about that in a second. So maybe we can make a pump. So DIY to the rescue. Here's the first insulin pump. Me laughing at my pain. That's legit. Like, he's like got an IV going here, and he's ready to go and run around in his insulin pump. That's the first pump. This gentleman here, I'm going to zoom in on that. That is a, you have to look closer. It's a photocopy. This is the syringe inside of a carved wooden pump. You see this line right here? And then there's the plunger. That's a piece of metal. A screw turns, and as a screw turns, it gets smaller, right? Because it's screwing into another nut. And it pulls, this screw turns, and it pulls that syringe plunger down, thereby delivering the insulin. It would do 1 unit per click, and it would hold about 40 units. So about 1 day's worth of insulin, and the resolution is 1 unit, which is like a teardrop worth of insulin. The gentleman who uses pens, his pen will do about 1/2 a unit a click. Is that correct? Just one. You usually just do it at 1. Do you ever do like 1 1/2 or 2 1/3? Just 1. So he's going by 1 as well. Some of the newer ones will do 1/2 a unit. The insulin pump that I have will do 1/10 of a unit. Little kids' ones will do 20ths of units, because you really need to think about that in the context of the airplane. Are we going to be going as we fly this airplane, or are we going to try to make little tiny movements? Now, back to that airplane analogy. You're going to go and fly from New York to LA, or all the way across America. That's your day. You'd like that to be a nice, smooth flight the whole way. You want to look at the altitude, the altimeter, multiple times, and you want to make small adjustments with your yoke, your joystick. You pull up, eat some food, blood sugar goes up. Push forward, blood sugar goes down. If you prick your finger, it hurts every time. I've been doing it for 25 years, hurts every single time. People always ask me, does it always hurt? Yes, it's a needle. Always. Like, you get used to that? No, it's a needle. Like, you get used to it. You've had paper cuts, right? You get used to a paper cut? No, it's always a paper cut. It's always painful. So most people who prick their fingers do it about 10 times a day. 5 is average. 10 would be like, any more than that would be annoying. So you're flying from New York to LA. You only get to look at the altitude 10 times. So pick the right 10. Okay? And you only get to touch the joystick as many times as you're willing to eat to go up, or do pen shots. The gentleman could probably do, how many times you should take a shot?
About 5.
So he takes 5. That's a great number. That's very high for a pen person. Some pen people are just like morning, lunch, and that's it. Like, it's very simple. He's got 5. So his resolution is look at his blood sugar 10 times, take a pen 5 times. So he gets to touch the joystick 5 times, and he gets to look at the altitude 10 times. It's still going to be a somewhat jerky flight across the US. What we really need is increased resolution. What if I could check my blood sugar every 5 minutes, and I could deliver deliver insulin every 5 minutes? And rather than making big jerky moves, I could do that thing that we already do when we're trying to keep the car in the lines. Just go like that, right? That's the goal. But I can't look at my blood sugar every 5 minutes. I'd go nuts. How do we measure more often? Well, this came out a while back. It's called the Gluco Watch. We're trying to do non-invasive ways. Nobody wants to put a needle in their body. Needles suck. So they came up with this idea to take 2 metallic pads and put it on your skin, and then give you an electric shock and go across, and look at the resistance across that shock as they looked at the resistance across the interstitial fluid to figure out if they could figure out your blood sugar. And it would cause burns. So when you would call them and say, hey, it really burns, it's getting a very major skin irritation, they say, yeah, just rotate it on the inside and then switch to the other wrist, giving this wrist a chance to heal, because you've got 4 sides. Yeah, they're not in business anymore. But they meant well, didn't they? Right? They were trying. So what we're using now for a CGM, or a continuous glucose meter, is usually a thing called a Dexcom, where this is the scary inserter. It's a little needle. There's a needle in there, right here. And that needle has a tube around it. So you stab yourself with the needle, and then you pull the needle out, leaving the tube that was around the needle in you. And that looks like this. It's a little steel dealy. So that's in my arm now, and it stays in there for anywhere from a week to 21 days. It doesn't hurt, though, because it's very small. And it's kind of like sipping and checking and figuring out what blood sugar is, and then it talks to the battery. Looks like this. I brought, by the way, all these things up front so you can come and see them. And it sits wherever you need to put it. Anywhere you've got an inch to pinch, you can put this. It can be on the tushy, it can be up here. I put mine in my arm. I move them around. I move this every week to 3 weeks, depending. I'll tell you about that in a second. And that tells me what my blood sugar is. So that's from an engineering perspective, that's the read. It is read only, every 5 minutes. But it's not whole blood, it's fluid. So it's plus or minus 10, 20% correct. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's totally wrong. Then on the right, we need to deliver insulin. We put a tube in the skin, into the fat, and then the pump, just like we saw with that wooden pump, has a screw that turns that then pushes the insulin through the flexible tubing. And then the loop is read your blood sugar, think about it, do what you're going to do, and then deliver the insulin. Nothing is automatic. If I'm going to have a cookie, I think about it, I do a bunch of math, and I say, well, it's got 30 grams of carbs, and da-da-da-da-da, and my ratio is 1 unit of insulin per 15 grams of carbs, so it's a 2-carb thing. But my blood sugar is already low, so I should use a unit. And you have 42 different factors, from the humidity to how you're feeling to whether or not you get the flu. I love that you're nodding. It makes me feel very safe. Thank you for that. There's all these things, and it's not automatic. And we always like, oh, this just does everything for you, right? No, it does nothing. It does nothing for you. It is delivery only. Delivery, that's it. This is what it looks like if you are a supermodel who does not have diabetes, and you've been hired to show what it looks like. The reality is bruises and holes and lumpy bits and fat that has become lumpy because it can no longer absorb insulin because it's been abused over 20 years. You'll put one hole in you as you heal another. Sometimes you'll hit a gusher, where you'll hit a vein or an artery that's a little bit higher in the skin. So you'll be like, oh, this is a good spot, and you hit it, and it just blood everywhere. So it's not definitely for the faint of heart, and it looks nothing like that, and no one's belly button looks like that. But we have the read and then the write, okay? Yeah, and you have to move it around, and they can't be near each other because that's putting insulin in the fat and that's sucking it out, sucking out the data. If they were near each other, they would interfere. So I have to keep things on different sides of the body, and I have to rotate them, always looking for spots that I haven't abused. I'm not this guy, though. This is Chris Dancy, and he is in the quantified self movement. What he does is put as many sensors on his body as possible to develop a sixth sense. He wants to know about his blood pressure, about his heart rate, about his sugar, all these things. All I care about is sugar. But what's interesting about the quantified self and the people who live within it is that they believe that you do develop a sense. I know what my blood sugar is mostly because I have, for multiple times a day, for decades, felt some kind of way and looked at a number, and now I have a number that means this is what it feels like when that number happens. So then my wife will say, what's your blood sugar? I'm like, oh, I'm about 130 right now. We use different numbers in the US. And I'll look, and it'll all be confirmed, right? Just like you know about how fast the car is going, plus or minus 20 kilometers an hour, right? We need this data. I want to be able to store it somewhere. I want to be able to access it. I wrote an article in 2001, almost 18 years ago. This is young Scott. The pump might use my cell phone to call its data into a central server. Maybe if I wander near my home computer, the pump could take the opportunity to upload its data. Bluetooth was just coming out. Bluetooth's 30-meter range, no, 1.5 meters tops, could provide my doctor with my medical history as I sit in the waiting room. Like, I had this image of these connected systems 20 years ago. I wrote this on my blog. My wife and I went around and we managed it on a Palm Pilot and a laptop in the hotel. It is a complicated thing. So there's a community of people who have decided that this is problematic, and they've decided we're not waiting. We get tired of waiting, so that's our hashtag, we are not waiting. And there's a foundation called the Night Scout Foundation that allows us to unlock our data, particularly from things like continuous glucose meters, and store it in an open source system. It's built on Node, it runs on Heroku and Azure, stores the data in Mongo, and it lets you see your blood sugar in real time. So for example, that's my blood sugar right now. Please don't spread the URL around. It's security through obscurity. But that's me eating lunch at 12. I went to Subway. I had 45 grams of carbs. You can see the prediction line indicating what it thinks might happen. I'm on stage. I might have a low blood sugar. I don't know. You can see my insulin on board. That's insulin that has not yet been absorbed into my system. You can see how many carbs that I have left. You can see the battery level. All these things need to be thought about. Is the battery about to die on this? On my pump? Is My blood sugar decent over the last little while. You see this area here, how it's blank? I had a battery die while I was sleeping. Look at this area here. What do you see as the difference between the data on the right and the data on the left? See the data on the left is very noisy? It's kind of yucky looking. That was the sensor starting to die. The first 6 to 7 days are great, and then once you get into 10, 15, you're stretching the life of the sensors. You can start to get sloppy data, and then they die. So these are all other things that we have to think about as well. Additionally, there are somewhat arbitrary limitations put on these sensors by the companies. These sensors are rated for 7 days. We can restart them and lie to them and say it's a fresh day, and we can restart them like 3 or 4 times. But after 20 days, it'll become a problem. But these are hundreds of dollars each. So we've even got a community of people who dremeled these open with a Dremel tool and found out that it's just 2 watch batteries. So we dremeled them open and then 3D print a top. This is a legitimate one. This has been dremeled open, replaced the battery, and then epoxied it shut again. And that'll run for another 3 months, thereby enabling someone to not spend $700 or whatever this costs, especially for people in the US that don't have insurance. The NHS is a lot better than what the situation we have right now. Insulin in the US right now is $300 a bottle. I was told it's between 8 and 20 pounds here. So we have, underground railroads, for lack of a better word, of these systems that are trying to get this stuff out to the people. Oops, let me switch over to my slides. Oh, this website also gives me a REST API to my own blood sugar. You can see here the degrees, the slope, the current blood sugar. So a buddy of mine took that, wrote a service that runs on Windows that downloads that every 5 minutes into a text file. So now it's in my Git prompt. So as I'm working, each time I hit enter, it doesn't call out, it gets it from the text file. We, as diabetics, need these glanceable displays. I need to always know what my blood sugar is. It's not about notification, it's about knowing the trend. Yeah, you could pop a notification and tell me that I'm about to have a low blood sugar, but I'd like to know at 10,000 feet and not at 500 feet. So we've built in systems on watches. There's my blood sugar there. There's a chart. And we've added it now. Just like 3 days ago, I rebuilt this watch, and this is a complication, a Series 4 complication on the new watches. My blood sugar's right there. So if I'm ever hanging out with you or talking to you and you see me looking at my phone or looking at my watch, I'm not trying to leave. I'm just always thinking about what's going on with the altitude. Otherwise, I'm going to get nailed. But these are all systems that are a combination of us breaking into closed systems and using closed systems to then move things to open systems. So for example, this Dexcom device uploads to their cloud, and then we've kind of sucked the data back out of their cloud and put it into an open cloud. Does that make sense? Additionally, we've discovered that we can write small little devices, create small little devices, and catch the data in the air. So we've got folks that have sniffed Bluetooth low energy in the air, and as this transmitter goes and says, hey, blood sugar, every 5 minutes, we catch it with an Android phone or a small device and then upload it. So we intercept that data. Right now, my system goes from here to my phone, which is around here somewhere, right here, and then up to the cloud, which is their cloud, and then back down to my own cloud, to my REST API. It does run offline. It works just fine on an airplane, but the cloud-connected scenario works a lot better. All of these are different systems that are made to grab that data as it runs by in the air. And once you have control of your own health data, you can build cool workflows. You've all done things with IFTTT or Microsoft Flow where it's like, if I tweet a picture, put it in my Dropbox. I want to do things like, can I SMS someone my blood sugar or put it in Google Calendar or download it to Google Drive? You think about your to-dos and your calendars and your inbox, and I think about all those things plus blood sugar. That's why it's in the Get prompt. That's why it's in glanceable displays. Right now, in my house, back in Portland, is a thing called a DAC board, which is a wall, you can see all this on my blog, which is a wall-mounted family calendar with my blood sugar alongside the family calendar. And my wife literally just texted me that she and the boys were talking about if daddy's having a low blood sugar, what they should do. We've also got a vertically mounted one. It's got weather and blood sugar on it as well, because any REST API allows me to do that. That way, my diabetes management is a communal thing as opposed to a lonely thing. We've got people who've taken pebble watches and smart watches and put things on top of them. Notice how they're putting things together. Once that data gets freed, they're putting things together. Now, if I can read my sugar values and I can think about what to do about it, how could I then close the loop where it wouldn't be me that does the dosing? And how complicated would that be? Well, what would be needed? If we were going to build one of these, I would want to read in what my current blood sugar is. I can do it from the REST API now, or I can grab it from the air. And then I need to write out to deliver insulin. Now, there's two ways to deliver insulin. There is a bolus, and that's a medical term that just means an infusion of liquid. You can go and, if you're dehydrated, they'll give you a bolus of saline. If you have a bolus of insulin, it means a large infusion at one moment. And then there's basal, which is background insulin. The gentleman with the pens has two different pens. He's got the morning pen, which is the background insulin for the day. It's basically a long, slow-acting thing. It takes one shot, and it goes for 12 hours or 24 hours. And then there's the breakfast, lunch, and dinner boluses. One step would be to automate the basal, which is effectively making a self-driving car that knows how to stay in the lines, but just can't make dramatic turns. Right? It's like Tesla Autopilot isn't autopilot. It's stay in the lines. It doesn't stop at stoplights. It doesn't make sharp turns. It just stays in the lines. It's a cool cruise control. We could make cool diabetes cruise control that would prevent nighttime low blood sugars and floating away and getting high without realizing it. But it wouldn't solve the mealtime issue. But it would be a good start. However, I need to be able to remotely control a pump. Pumps like this is a 15-year-old pump, were given in the 90s remote controls that you'd put on your keychain so that you could dose privately, because people were concerned about bothering other people at the table with needles and stuff, and they didn't want to be ashamed, so they would just go boop, 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 boop. And they would count, like it's like a Morse code, and I can give myself insulin and then deliver it. I was canceling it right there. And you do it with a remote control. So we reverse engineered and then, the people who are not me, reverse engineered that and found out that it's running on 915 megahertz and the 900 megahertz bandwidth, which is the same as your garage door opener. And they figured out how to go and do that. But then a hacker displayed that you could do that maliciously if you knew someone's pump serial number, which kind of messed it up for everybody, which then caused the pump companies to stop that. So it only works on a certain old firmware of that pump or before. So there's now a black market for pumps where we have to go on Craigslist or whatever and find the certain pump that allows this, because they ruined it for us. Because there's always some episode of Law and Order where somebody has, like, walking down the street and they got their insulin pump and they go, and then they die. And then they zoom up and then someone is like with like a Pringles can and a computer and it's like, yeah, I just killed that guy remotely because he had an insulin pump. It would not kill me. It would give me a mediocre afternoon. It would kind of screw up my day. And I sure in the hell wouldn't fall on the ground. But that's the sense. Like, it can kill hackers from a mile away. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes, it would suck. But no, I'm not concerned that one of you is going to kill me remotely. I would probably disconnect my pump, and I would look at it dripping, and I would go, that's weird. And then I would, walk away from you. It would be faster to just stab me. So if you want to kill me, just stab me. That's what the thing is there. But so they ruined it for everybody, so now we can only use these pumps. But we figured it out. But what's blocking us continues to be this closed ecosystem with no open standards, no published spec. Everything has been reverse engineered. There was a gentleman who reverse engineered how to get the data off of Bluetooth. Myself and a gentleman named Benjamin West reverse engineered how to break into the cloud with a man-in-the-middle attack. There is, in fact, an ISO Bluetooth profile, a standard Bluetooth profile for pumps and blood sugar meters that's not used. You know how you pair your headphones and your phone goes, oh, hey, headphones, cool. You pair your car and your phone goes, oh, a car, should I sync your contacts? And it knows what to do. Those are profiles of types of objects. There's no pumps that use Bluetooth yet, even though the profile exists. And very, very few pumps allow remote access for security. Additionally, we can't, as an open source community, start selling or producing or creating this software and giving it to you, because what if you kill somebody with it? What if you kill yourself? What if you kill your kid? So none of this is saying that we are or have packaged an open source artificial pancreas. Instead, we have created toolkits by which you could build one from a reference design. Do you see the subtle difference there? You know how we've all got like an uncle or an aunt that has like a kit car that they built, or a motorcycle that they're working on? It's not street legal, but they built it from a kit. It's that kind of thing. Because then when they kill themselves driving that kit car, you go, well, he was crazy. He built his own car. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't accidentally make an open source pancreas. You'd have to really work over months to make one of these. So we make it hard on purpose. This is a kind of a Cartesian product of all the different things to get your blood sugar meter in the cloud, because you have different brands. Some people have Android. Some people have iPhones. Some people want to run Heroku. Some people run Azure. All of these different things, the combination of the watches, the pumps, the sensors, some things work, some things don't, different brands, different versions. It's a very challenging ecosystem. If there were standards, it would not be. If we were going to close the loop, we would also need things like a place to store your carbohydrates. Apple Health Kit is amazing for that. You'd want to have remote access to be able to remotely monitor someone. If you send your diabetic kid to school, you'd love to have their blood sugar on a watch. That would be amazing. The nurse would want to, if a nurse at a school had 5 or 6 kids, they would want like a panel of all the diabetic kids and see what their blood sugar is. We have that ability now. So what's slowly been built up by a bunch of genius people in the community, a little bit at a time, are Bluetooth libraries, Python pump libraries, various snippets of code, some in Node, some in C, some in Python, that talks to pumps and different systems that can then be put together into a larger loop. So this is a proposal for the generations of what it would take to close the loop. The generation 1 would be, I detected you're going to have low blood sugar, like maybe you're passed out. I'm going to turn off the pump so as not to make it worse. That would be level 1. That's not a very useful thing, but if you are low a lot, it'd be useful. All the way to the 3rd generation would be a multi-hormone closed loop, fully automated. It would mean like, oh, you're diabetic, that sucks. Put this on your body, go eat cake. Somewhere in between is where we are. We're basically level 4. We can automate the basal, the background. We can basically keep you in the lines, but you have to dose at meals. You have to tell me about your meal. That's where we're at. This is what we would do to build a pancreas. And Dana Lewis is the kind of the godmother of the open source pancreas community. She and her husband created the first open source artificial pancreas. And it was very clever. There was a receiver that talks to this. And you would go to the doctor and you'd plug in a USB cable and you'd download the data every 3 months. She got the idea, well, I mean, it's just a PC and a USB cable that says, what's your blood sugar? We're doing it every 3 months. We could just do it in a loop every 5 minutes. So then she got a Raspberry Pi and taped this to it with a thing and wrote a loop. Get your blood sugar, get your blood sugar, get your blood, every 5 minutes. It drains the battery very fast, but it doesn't care whether it's 3 months or every 5 minutes. Then she saw that the doctor was talking to the pump with a thing called a care link, which is a very specific doctor thing that you can't find very much, but she got some on eBay. You plug that into a Raspberry Pi, and that allows you to write to the pump. And then she would get a big battery, like a big, one of those big, we'll pretend this is a battery. Get a big battery like for your phone, and she'd put that in her, what do you call it, bum bag? and she'd carry her pack with her pancreas. It's about this big. These are the components: the continuous meter, the translator that talks to the pump itself, a battery, and a Raspberry Pi. It's a tiny computer that's saying, what's your blood sugar, what's your blood sugar, what's your blood sugar? And then it's running a loop. It's thinking about what you should do, given context, and then it's talking to the thing. But that's a lot of crap to carry around. That's no fun. So then we talked to Intel. They made a thing called the Intel Edison. It's a tiny little 486 looking thing. It weighs nothing. 3D printed case. And you have an Edison that runs Juby Linux, which is a little tiny Linux, runs Node and Python. Then you take a LiPo, or a lithium poly-ion battery, and you stick it in there. And you can run this for about 10 hours in your pocket. You just needed to get that 900 megahertz transmitter, because Bluetooth is standard and Wi-Fi is standard, but we just need that translator. Well, we talked to SparkFun, and they make these little boards. So you take the 900 megahertz Explorer board and you stack the Edison on top of it, and you put that sandwich into a 3D printed case, and then you have a little pocket computer. But it's got no screen, so you have to SSH into it, or you use the cloud to see what's going on. But that's cool, and you keep that in your pocket. And then Intel discontinued the Edison. So now we have a black market for finding Edison. So if you have an Intel Edison, no joke, contact me, and we will donate them to someone who can use them for a pancreas. So then she's come up with her community, the idea of taking a Raspberry Pi Zero, and they made a custom hat, which is a sandwich that sits on top of the Raspberry Pi, with a tiny OLED screen and 2 buttons and a battery, and that is now a pancreas. Completely self-contained. It is the loop. It is the thing that closes the loop. Now, there are people, though, where'd my switchy go? There we go. There are people, though, who have said that that's innovative and cool, but that's a brain. And I'm carrying around a brain already in my pocket. I've got a pocket supercomputer. Maybe my phone could be the brain, and this could be smaller. That's pretty small. This gentleman here, Pete, is an electrical engineer, and his child, his name is Riley. And Pete said, well, you know, my phone has a CPU, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. The only thing it's missing is that 900 megahertz ability to talk to the pump. So he made a link. It's a Bluetooth to 900 megahertz bridge that makes my pump, my 15-year-old non-Bluetooth enabled pump, look like a Bluetooth object. And then the pancreas runs on the phone as a background app. Now, for many years, we would run this, and the phones would, you know how iPhone just swipes away? Like people they swipe up their apps to close them. iPhones would have memory pressure, and they would go, yeah, you're playing Candy Crush. I'm going to shut your pancreas down. You know, because you want to play Candy Crush. You don't want to live. There's nothing that can run in the kernel. There's no hypervisor. There's no, like, this is an urgent, important process. There's no way to say that on an iPhone. But newer iPhones went from 1 gig to 2 gigs to 4 gigs. They have enough memory now that memory pressure hasn't been a problem. And you can run these tiny little apps in the background. And the background loop is like 30 or 40 megs. So it stays around, and the iPhone does not usually toss it out. So now there is, in fact, a choice of artificial pancreases. I can pick OpenAPS, which is entirely self-contained. That is a little computer running on something like a Raspberry Pi, which gives me full control. It's written in Python and Node and Go. I could SSH into this pancreas, and I could show you the logs. We've got a tiny little screen with a tiny little graph, and the batteries last about 12 hours. It's pretty cool. It has a very sophisticated algorithm, and they also have their choice of algorithms, so you can pick your own algorithm. Or I could do loop. These are all, I brought all these for you to look at later. These are all Riley links that can bridge to the pumps. And then I'm going to actually pull out the HDMI here, and I'm going to hook up my phone. How do I do that? I'm going to hook up my phone here. And I'm going to plug it in, if I can do this right. There we go. Okay, this is my actual pancreas. You can see my pump right there, and I can see the signal. There's Scott's Riley link. And these are all, basically it's a REST API for the pump. Get pump model, read pump status, discover commands. I can click on that, and now it's talking Bluetooth to the small device, which is not a computer. It's just a bridge over to that 900 megahertz band, reading the pump status, and it'll bring back some JSON. And then we can go and write code against that. It's very slow. There you go. 33 units of insulin remaining, and the battery's at almost a volt and a half. It is not currently delivering, not currently bolusing. Okay? If I want to eat some food, I can go in here and I can use emoji. Why, you laugh, right? But why? Why would I want to do that? Because of the glycemic index of food. White rice hits you faster than brown rice. Fruit hits you faster than cheese. This way I can go and say, look at the absorption time when I put in cheese, but the absorption time if I put in fruit might be less than that, right? So let me start over. So right now it's at 3. There's 2 hours, but if I add in some pizza, now it's 4 hours. I can look at the algorithm to decide about how it's going to expect that curve to be predicted. This is current blood sugar, which is very good. This is a prediction line. But look, as it started to think I was going to have a low on stage here, it turned off my pump at 141. You see that third line down there? At 141, it turned off the pump, and it hasn't been on since, as it's trying to land the plane smoothly. And then I can go and say, well, I'm going to be working out soon, so I need you to run a little higher, so I'll have energy and glucose. So it's going to change that target. Or I can say, I'm going to eat soon, so I want you to bring it lower so that I can eat successfully. And then that green loop in the upper left-hand corner there is telling me when the last time it checked and figured out what was going on. And that sits on my desktop. Now, that has got me pretty much right in between the two lines that I'm trying into. This is the road that I'm trying to walk down, trying to drive down, rather, and it's keeping me in between those lines pretty successfully. I'm going to switch back over to the PC. There we go. I can also do it from the watch, and we can go and dose from the watch as well, because I've got Face ID or Touch ID, or the fact that Apple Watches lock when they're taken off your wrist. So there's some security there as well, which is nice. And it's all open source, with the goal being, of course, to die of old age. This is not fun. This is a roller coaster. That's a high blood sugar. That can happen because I ate a cookie. That can happen because a couple of days ago, I was taking insulin, and I had forgotten to plug that in, and it was in my pocket. And I got a pocket full of insulin, because I just was dosing. I was pushing it into me, and I was like, oh, my pocket's all wet. It smells like Band-Aids. And it was insulin. So I was like, oh, crap, I ate breakfast and did nothing. That's where 400, I don't know what it is. And what's horrible in metric? 20s?
Yeah, it's that. I was 10, 12, 14.
OK, so if you're 20 or so, you're hating life. Yeah, so 400, you can't do that for more than a couple weeks. You'll be in the hospital. This is swerving entirely off the road and into the ditch. Right? We just have different measurements. Now, there is a number. Do you use hemoglobin A1C here in the UK?
Yeah.
OK, so this is a number we agree on, which is not the short term, what's my blood sugar this moment, but what has my blood sugar been over the last 3 months? It's a decaying average over 3 months. Your blood sugar, as the normals, is about 4 to 6. That says that there's, and this is an oversimplification, it's like 4 or 5% of your red blood cells are coated in sugar. We'll just say that. That's about a simplification. Numbers double that, you will die. You cannot marinate in your own sugar very long. So we try to keep those numbers as low as possible. We want to simulate being normal. Most diabetics are just bouncing back and forth between these numbers, trying to stay on the edge of normal when they get their blood done. I spent many years at 7 or 7.5. This is my actual blood from my doctor. I am now 5. That means that if you look on a blood panel, a CBC or complete blood panel, it doesn't look like I'm diabetic. And I absolutely attribute that to being super anal retentive and uptight and type A personality and an artificial pancreas. I could not have flown here on Wednesday, arrived at noon, talked at 6 o'clock at a user group, woke up fresh, and hung out with you all. That just simply would not be possible. With needles, imagine all those curves and all that stuff I showed you, then change time zones and have overlapping curves of insulin taken in different time zones and try to do that math. It just wouldn't have been possible. I couldn't have even flown here and dealt with that. To be a diabetic is hard. To be a diabetic crossing time zones multiple times in a week is virtually impossible. It is this system that makes that possible. And I'm very thankful for it. So if we agree that our data anywhere is a right, that it's my data, and I want to get access to my data, that we want to encourage the companies, the pump makers, the sensor makers, the blood sugar meter makers, to publish specifications, to make REST APIs, to make libraries, to encourage us all to explore our data so that we might go and do this, to go and make these. Now, at some point, probably 5 years from now, I'll be able to buy one of these off the shelf. That'll probably be great. Hopefully, though, then the open source community will have made one that is 5 years in the future and does other things. I wouldn't recommend this for the faint at heart. But when you say things, someone might say, well, what, do you worry about security? Do you worry about accuracy? What about bugs? It sucked so bad before, a couple of bugs a week would still not keep me off this. You know what I'm saying? And I usually hit 1 or 2 a year, and I report it, and we discuss it, and it gets fixed. Like the kinds of bugs you have, just like the assassination attempt that we talked about, will give you a horrible evening, but they will probably not put you in the hospital. So I've had time zone bugs, and I was off by a couple of units, and I had to get some sugar. But it's so much better. Just like people aren't saying that Tesla autopilot or cruise control should be removed because 1 or 2 dumb people crashed into a parked car, right? The state of diabetes technology has improved. I wrote an article about it in 2012. If you want to go and read on my blog in the diabetes section, I have the sad state in 2012 and the promising state in 2018. And I talk about the differences that 6 years make as we start to move. People have created nonprofits like Tide Pool. If you're a diabetic, you should check it out. If you have a friend who's a diabetic, it's a way for you to put all of your data in one place that you control and have API access to. They have a great uploader. So just as I was talking about making uploaders for individual meters, they've gone and done the work for you and made uploaders to get your data out of that. The Night Scout Foundation, that's the node application that I showed you. They are a nonprofit. You can donate money. You could help them with their source code. You could improve the D3.js and the SVG that we use to render the graphs, all kinds of stuff. If you want to learn about the code that actually runs the OpenAPS, the artificial pancreas system, the code is up here for the reference design and documentation on how you could potentially build your own and what hardware you would need. This is a little boy, not mine, going to school for the first time with his artificial pancreas. And the parents are then able to see it remotely and see that the little boy is doing OK. The hashtags to check out are OpenAPS and We Are Not Waiting. Thank you very much. And I'm going to put all the pancreases and equipment down here at the front for you to come and check out. Thanks for listening.